What I find fascinating is the discourse about Andor that's happening right now.
It's splitting up the people that want to see more background of Star Wars and the people who want to see more like Marvel Star Wars.
I think Andor represents the biggest risk Star Wars has undertaken.
But let's get into the podcast.
Why are we an authority on pop culture?
Why are we an authority?
Yeah.
Someone will have the same opinion. It doesn't matter. You can have any opinion in the world. There's going to be some people
Somebody
that
will agree with us, yeah.
So let's see if people agree with us with our take on Andor. Okay, Star Wars Andor.
We've been watching a lot of Andor.
Watch Andor.
I mean, obviously, we're both huge Star Wars nerds. Yeah. You built a lightsaber at Star Wars Land.
I kind of felt like, wouldn't they actually be quite heavy? Like, would they not feel like a two-hander?
So the original trilogy, they fight with a different style than the prequel and sequel trilogies. Originally, what George told them is that these sabers have great weight to them. That the light blades that came out actually had a huge amount of weight, which is why you see they fought more like broadswords, right? In the original trilogy, it was very much like heavy swings and strikes and all that kind of stuff.
And now you got these.
You know, now it's like more fencing style.
But that brings us back to Andor,
style.
because you know what I liked about Andor? There was none of that in it.
Which is amazing, because in Star Wars, like, lightsabers Jedi, and that is the Star Wars icon. It's a testament to Gilroy, honestly, the show director, that they had such faith in him, because basically the pitch was they were going to make a show, the biggest Star Wars show in the terms of like length and money involved, that didn't have any of those things at all. Like the actual icons of what Star Wars was.
Okay, so what percentage of the show was them executing it correctly, and what percentage was it just wasn't about Jedi, so it's getting bonus points?
I mean, I think not having about Jedi makes it harder, because for your casual
that's a crutch.
All the hardcore fans are like, yeah, let's, we want to see more of the original galaxy, but your average viewer is like that.
They're waiting for it.
Yeah, that's what they're expecting to have in Star Wars. So I think it makes it harder, because now you've got to really have the compelling story, which I think a lot of people have. Not that I necessarily agree with that viewpoint, but a lot of people think that's what's been missing in Star Wars media lately, that compelling story.
Can I have a hot take?
All right.
I think what's been missing is the fucking acting. They've been doing the same story for 9 movies. Like, I'm sick. It's the same story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's about a superhero, Jesus Christ, that comes across. Everyone's like, this is the martyr that's going to save the day. Whatever. That's all the stories are. But how many good side characters have we had in the Star Wars movies lately? 0, in my opinion. Maybe Finn. Finn, buddy. Like, there's not that many good side characters.
I think there was. I think none have really been used properly or explored any sort of interesting dynamic.
Like, obviously Cassian, I forget his name, right off the I'm not good with the actor's name. Obviously he does an amazing job, but the side actors, in particular that one trooper and the female lead who was like supposed to be the lead, but like she just kind of let it happen. Like all those characters, for me, they had to have all of those work perfectly for the show, because the whole show was just about the nerves of steel of these underdogs, right?
Yeah,
which for me is a real. It kind of goes back to like the OG Rebel feel, which is you like these characters, they really care, they don't know if they're going to make it.
Really, A New Hope was supposed to be, this just kicked off. Like, you are being dropped into, these guys just became a legitimate rebel force against the Empire.
Yeah.
Like, they are now this massive threat. So we should not see them at this, we shouldn't see them at a Rogue One. Rogue One was them finally cohesing together to actually a fleet jumped out and they beat them, even though they lost a huge amount of numbers, and which is the reason why Rogue One is also
This is like
brilliant.
It's starting to be a war,
Exactly. But they're doing a really good job of like, these are disjointed pieces, and it's, there's people trying to kind of bring them together, which is what I hope they continue for the rest of the series.
And I also like that they're continuing the terrorist vibes, where it's like, the Imperial sees them as terrorists. Yeah. Like, you almost feel like they're a little bit of terrorists with the way they're acting, where it's very
because in history, there is no insurgency or insurrection that did not start with some really sketchy stuff. And so I think they're doing
they're doing war almost from like a realistic standpoint, which is what I like about it.
Well, it's not even a war you're seeing yet. And that's the piece that I like, is like you're seeing these like little moments where like, okay, there is a chance for momentum to gain. And that's what sells it. I think
you
that's
can
what makes
see-
it realistic. That's what sells the idea of the Rebel Alliance.
Well, and what it sells the Rebels, but honestly, it sells more the Imperials from me. Because it's like, the thing is, you always saw the Imperials as these mindless goons that were kind of the bad guys. But from watching the Rebels in action and watching what they're doing, you could see how the Imperials are like, hey, we're out here with the natives, just letting them watch the thing, we're chilling, and then you hit us with a terrorist attack during like a celebration. Like, you know what I mean? You can see it from the Imperials, how that would really double down, like, fuck the Rebels. Like, they're the problem.
We will not negotiate with terrorists.
I think what's interesting about Andor is the story is much more about the characters and the struggles they're going versus like we're trying to chart a course.
The pacing of the story.
It's the pacing, it's the directing.
The
so you have more room as an actor to actually explore the character you're developing versus like we have to literally like I mean, and I don't hate on the sequel trilogy as much. People like they were okay.
But
I mean,
the first 5 minutes of Rise of Skywalker is like some of the worst movies.
I felt like I was sprinting in the theater the entire time because you're just going so fast through
it's
these
like
motions.
why is Kylo suddenly in a spaceship and what is he flying at and why does this saber match up perfectly with the horizon?
Exactly. So it's like you're getting more you're getting more room to actually explore, and they're allowing it to breathe. And what I find fascinating is the discourse about Andor that's happening right now.
Well, I think what it's doing is it's splitting up the people that want to see more background of Star Wars and the people who want to see more like Marvel Star Wars. Okay, put it this way. We've been watching movies from like the Ion Cannon point of view where they're orbitally nuking entire cities, right? And then they go down and they meet like the one guy who's like brawling it up. Like the power level is so different.
It's so different
that it's hard for people to care.
And I think where that came across was for the first time ever in Star Wars, they made a TIE fighter terrifying. And that's impressive.
I'd say Moff Gideon, but I do agree. I mean,
sure. Yeah.
You know what it does? Is it's the opposite side of we saw Palpatine force lightning down an entire universe worth of ships. We saw him.
You take that
1v1
scene and you take the scene of like the 7 of them running to hide their couple of firearms from a single TIE fighter sweeping overhead.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, it's hard to believe that's in the same cinematic scope. What Andor reminds me of is one of my favorite movies out there is Sicario. And the terms of there's just so much tension and foreboding and just this like overwhelming sense of
unease.
Yeah, it's just unease, so uneasy. And it's like this is just an overbearing thing. And in fact, even when I was watching, the first like 4 or 5 episodes, and he's meeting the Resistance guys, and they're talking about the planning and all that, it was like flashbacks to my like public safety and military and law enforcement careers of like prepping to go do some sort of like operation or like service or whatever it is. It struck me as like somebody in that understands that, has either been there or they've got friends that have been there. Like they nailed that down. If you were talking about the numbers of deployments of Hind helicopters, right, which is the Russian military gunship, right, or like an Mi-24 or whatever, and you're talking about it in the terms of strategic, they've got only 4 in this region and we've got enough anti-air sats to take it down. You're looking at it from this like big picture viewpoint. It's like it takes on a different context versus the guy that's on the ground and you're clutching your little man pad, which is a man-portable anti-air device, and you are the guy that's got to shoot this thing down. That thing is horrifying, It's absolutely terrifying. And so the perspective has shifted. Regardless of what you think about Andor, you have to give it props for that piece right there. It shows
acknowledgement of scale.
Yeah,
which is something that's been very difficult to do in the Star Wars genre. Think of it this way, right? All these fucking people are doing all this work to take down a TIE fighter and do this one thing, but Darth Nihilus shows up and drains the entire planet. Because you can do power creep 2 ways. You can go up or you can go down.
Right. Yeah, so if they really push it and we get much more ground level stuff, where shooting down a TIE fighter is a big win, taking on 5 stormtroopers who are supposed to be this elite Marine Corps of the Empire, that's a big win. If we push that down, then when all of a sudden we throw in like that Darth Nihilus moment.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
I mean, that has so much more impact because you're just, you're like, okay, I've got some context for this. It's a huge struggle in the Star Wars universe to like get a couple of working blasters out.
And they just did a full week of work in like one.
Yeah, right. And then, he comes in and snap of a finger dismantles it. What's interesting, just looking at it from like a pure cinematography point of view, is this much more slower paced. The shots they use are a lot longer. He wanted filmed as much on location as possible. So they filmed in Scotland, which is why basically, Aldhani or whatever, I think it's Aldhani, the name of that planet they're on, is essentially Star Wars Scotland, which I found hilarious. They even used Scottish history where the migration where they moved the Aldhanis down to the spot. It's exactly what happened in Scotland by the British. But I think what's interesting is the flack that it's getting and the discourse from the fans is more about it's just too slow and boring.
The pacing. I think it's the pacing.
Which is fascinating because that's the pacing you need to really start telling a better, old original trilogy stories.
Here's what I think. I think if you're an ultra Star Wars massive nerd, you like it because, like you say, it gives contextual evidence to the other pieces.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're somebody who likes Star Wars maybe more casually, you probably don't like this one as much. So how much are the people right, though, where it's like, okay, so these are our points about why we make it like Star Wars more, but there is a certain amount of it where it's the reason we like it is so drastically different than typical Star Wars, and there is a percentage of people that want to see traditional Star Wars, and when they see these characters they necessarily don't care about for 7-8 episodes in a row, how much of that is realistic? I mean, is there a point that people have and the show's a little boring? Is it a little boring?
You could argue that pieces out there like the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Redford.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Classic, right?
Classic, beautiful cinematic piece. And it is long holding shots. And because you have these long, steady shots where you're just watching Brad Pitt, you could say that's boring, right?
Oh.
Because there's so much, it's lengthy, you're just holding these long, uncomfortable gazes.
The tension is more valuable the longer it goes.
Yeah,
and
once it builds up the tension. And I think what Andor is doing is boring and is slow compared to all the other Star Wars media that's been pumped out. In some ways, I understand why people kind of say it. I don't necessarily blame them because Star Wars for the past, whoever knows how many, for many years.
I would argue since Clone Wars.
Yeah, Clone Wars. I love Clone Wars, but Clone Wars, kids' animated show.
It's the antithesis to what we've been watching with Cassian, where you're in the actual ring and you're all fighting a million droids.
Yeah, they're just pumping out tons of action. And so you've had this brand, this genre that has just produced this kind of very fast-paced, sort of actiony set pieces, and it's gotten a little bit away from the hero's journey a bit. And the hero's journeys that do happen are really amped up. The stakes aren't that high, and then all of a sudden you have your next content piece that comes up that's almost off-brand, really. And I would argue it's more of the original brand that
it's closer to the OG series.
Yeah, well, and it captures some more of the feelings. And it's a huge shift in course.
Because the OG series was not fast-paced. I don't care what people say.
It wasn't. Slow. It was, yeah. And it's just, it has to do, look, they're responding to the times, and prequel trilogies came out, you got the Fast and Furious and the Transformers and, all these huge franchises, right, where that's really developed. And a lot of it, too, is, for a long time, Star Wars has been trying to make inroads to China. China loves their huge action block. They do not care about character development. They want huge action blockbuster set pieces, lots of CGI, right? And that's a massive market. So it's responding to the market, right? But the market has changed now to these streaming services where you have small screens, really dominate. It's all about trying to retain your streaming numbers. You produce really high quality, limited series set pieces that can really explore these niche genres. So in some ways, it's like the perfect moment for Star Wars to really get back to, the Flash Gordon type of thing it was trying to do.
I kind of think Mandalorian is so well beloved because it's really in the middle between these two. It has enough of the slow pacing and story development and character development and side actors. Yeah. But then, it's a fucking Mandalorian. So
it's a serialized weekly, villain of the week type of episode.
It's the Samurai Jack of Star Wars.
Yeah. Which is great, and people love that, right? It's got a lot of broad appeal.
That's good.
Does Andor represent a shift? A purposeful shift by Star Wars trying to move the pace of where the brand is going? Or is it just this is the thing that Andor is doing?
Here's my hot take. I think it's on purpose because I think what they're trying to do is they're appealing to the audience that's becoming adult. And so they're trying to do more Game of Thrones style adult level Star Wars.
And that's where I was just going, is I wonder too how much of this is an influence of the Game of Thrones. You looked at early Game of Thrones, which was a phenomenon. I mean, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. I mean, it was one of the greatest phenomenons ever in television history.
You can't deny it.
And then they saw the backlash of the later seasons where it lost all those elements that really made it so popular. You're sitting in the writer's room. You've just faced so much backlash to your movies that you stop producing Star Wars movies for a while. You have to have a Game of Thrones show in your stable of content.
You kind of do now.
I mean, that you have to, right? But
they almost invented their own genre of like political intrigue at the adult level.
I don't think Andor is a Star Wars Game of Thrones thing, and I don't think that was the intent. But I think
it's the closest to it, though.
But I think it has so much influence that people are seeing that, man, there's really a demand for that content there.
Okay, so where do they go from Andor then? So like, where's logically the next best thing that they should be like? What's the step if you're Disney and you're telling the story, and you're building the universe as a universe creator? What's the next story that needs to be slided in after Andor?
I mean, I think they continue pushing stories of, the in-betweeners, right? These little
rebel narrative.
These small moments of, but I mean, even going back to like Clone Wars, pre-Clone Wars, like how cool would it be to see a limited series of the Confederacy of Independent Systems rising up, and those moments there, and you have the moments of like how the small Jedi interact with the small people.
You had me for a moment with the in-betweeners. You lost me with going more political. Here's the thing. I think you can go real, but you can't go political. Like, I think you're going to lose too much of the audience.
I mean, I don't know about how much political. Like, I would love like a band of brothers told of soldiers in the old.
Got that with Clone Wars.
But you do it where it's the Old Republic Judicial Department, which they've been told a little bit in the comics.
Oh, you want like an investigation.
But like the judicials, and then they enter into the Clone Wars and how they pivot through the Clone Wars and then into the Empire. Like a band of brothers, these characters navigating through the whole world being rebuilt multiple times. That'd be fascinating.
I think that we need to see where they stand on canon on things like Darth Revan and the Old Republic. I would like to see them go there.
Well, and
personally, from a selfish point of view. I want that Rings of Power budget on Old Republic. That's what I want. I want a real goddamn Old Republic.
You need a lot of broad appeal for that.
You don't think enough people know about the Old Republic that they're going to watch
so.
it? But that's a marketing problem to solve.
Well, sure, but if, like Andor, for example, I mean, my girlfriend Kelly, she's watching Andor, and she really likes it because it's kind of like really good story. She understands, okay, Empire, and she's seen like half of Star Wars. So they see, okay, Empire, yeah, that's like the really bad guys. And oh yeah, the rebels are the ones like fighting again. That's a real classic story, right? You don't need a lot to just jump in and watch. Like Marvel, right? Marvel didn't just jump in.
Thanos wasn't the first.
Yeah, I mean, they had to build for a long time. Where you got something like She-Hulk, where they could finally pull She-Hulk off after a few decades.
Did they pull She-Hulk off after a few decades? Let's be real.
I mean, if you read the comics, they have a true to comics She-Hulk, which...
Then the comics have to be dog shit. So Andor, 1 to 10, what's your rating?
Honestly, in comparison to what? Like, the rest of fucking...
all of Star Wars.
Like, just as a standalone show, as a Star Wars show?
10 is... Holy shit, this is the best Star Wars I've ever seen. 1 is like, wow, this is worse than Rise of Skywalker.
9.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too.
It's a 9. It has so many elements Star Wars desperately needs. It hits so many like just right notes.
Is it the best non-movie Star Wars media made?
Oh yeah.
You think so?
Oh yeah, by far.
So it's better than Clone Wars, the animated show?
It's better. Clone Wars is right underneath it because it captures that original trilogy like feel that I really have not. It came a little bit in Rogue One. There was moments in the prequel trilogies. I'm a huge prequel trilogies fan, but there was a bit here and there. I don't really feel all in the sequel trilogies, which I think were okay in their own right. I have a lot of issues with them, but they're not as shit as people make them out to be. It by far got to this like, ooh shit, this is that raw core underdog feeling that I have not really had since Empire Strikes Back. And yes, I know Empire Strikes Back is the fucking holy grail of Star Wars. It's always everybody's number one top, which it should be, and it'll probably always be there.
I love you.
But, Andor gets to that, like, Empire Strikes Back feel closer than any other Star Wars piece of content. Andor is one of those things where if this represents where Star Wars is going in the terms of quality and stories and feel and production values and all that stuff, we're in a really, really good place. If Obi-Wan is a sign of where we're going, I got concerns. It was great. It's just, it felt like they walked in and be like, here's all the things we want to show. We have no idea how to fucking all get there. And it's going to be somewhat disjointed. The flow just felt weird, you know? Like, it felt that show needed to be like 12 episodes and needed to give more room. They needed more money to it. And I still don't understand how Obi-Wan was not their Rings of Power.
Well, they're starting to kind of run out of stories. Because, I mean, if you think about it, they just told Obi-Wan. They told Boba.
Well, that's why I think you're starting to see stuff like Andor, where it's like, okay, we have to start getting into different spaces to tell those stories. Because Andor, we knew kind of what it was going to be like from Rogue One, where Sith Acolyte and like Rangers of the New Republic, those particularly too, because with Ahsoka Tano, like we have it sort of in a feel from coming out of Mando, but like Rangers of the New Republic and Sith Acolyte, those are the two ones where that's really going to tell us where we're going.
All right, well, this has been Brothers Talk Andor.
Put on your hat, because we have to be the brothers who wear hats.
All right, brothers.
Every week a different hat.
Okay, so
Monday
the stream's
through Friday.
actually not over, because now I have to play video games, because that's my actual job. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be right back.